you are taught to find the problem and take out the problem. If you're the problem, how many times in suicide do we convince ourselves we're the problem? This world would be better without me. Yes, maybe it is on that side of not wanting to feel pain anymore. That's that helpless, hopeless, not good enough. How many times is it, well, I'm the freaking problem. I'm out of here. Everything's going to be better once I'm gone. Right? And I think that's so impactful to those of us that, have walked that path in whatever level that means for somebody. Thought about it, got close to it, attempted it. Man, that's exactly how I would have described myself at my worst. I'm the problem, and I'm helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And I think that well frames, in my professional opinion, suicide.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and we are excited today. If this is your first time listening, we are a leader-to-leader podcast where we're exploring how we can inspire and impact this world in the greatest manner possible. And so today, that is going to be no different. With me, we got a powerhouse guest, Dr. Trevor Wilkins, also known as the Angry Viking Therapist. Dr. Wilkins is a leading authority on trauma and PTSD treatment with over 20 years of experience in counseling and law enforcement. His no-nonsense, action-oriented approach challenges the status quo of therapy, helping people break through mental barriers and achieve real growth from trauma recovery to mental toughness. Dr. Wilkins is here to share game-changing insights that can help us all level up. Y'all know you're not going to want to miss this, and you're definitely going to want to share it. So, Trevor, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this one.
Me too. I'm glad Bear, aka TJ, introduced us, and we can have this great conversation and dive in. So, by the way, Bear was our most watched YouTube video, so we're going to challenge that today. Good. And get as much on there as possible. He's got a great following on YouTube, and they showed out for that episode. We laid it down.
Good. He's a genuine dude. We talked earlier about people that are genuine, and man, he's just, what you see is what you get with that guy.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So a lot of times it's people that aren't the most outgoing, aren't the most, I don't know if you want to use the flamboyant or whatever, just the most charisma, whatever. Sometimes they have a tough exterior. Sometimes they are a little bit introverted, and then you get to talk to them one-on-one, and that's like the most genuine, authentic, amazing human being, and that's Bear. So those are the people that I connect with, and I know you do as well. So
yeah, you described him well.
Your journey to me has really been fascinating. You go from law enforcement to becoming a leading trauma therapist. Can you walk us through how you ended up in this position? And then secondly, I want to know how besides the rugged good looks and beard, how the Angry Viking Therapist moniker came to be.
Yeah, they're both interesting. I'll tell you the Angry Viking one first because it's shorter and a little newer. So I was working on my doctorate, which I'll talk about. I'm working on my doctorate, and I'm at a residency at my doctorate. There's 20 or 30 of us in the room. We all know each other pretty well, and that level of education. And the dean of the program is writing something on the board, and he asked a question while he was kind of facing away, writing something on the board. And I just answered it out loud. And he turned around and he said, "Who answered that?" And somebody in the room said, like, the Angry Viking looking dude over there. And it just kind of stuck. It's definitely a part of history that I enjoy, not just watching, but learning about. My whole right arm is actually full of Viking tattoos and battles. And, my left side is all kind of Stoic philosophy and therapy stuff. It's my yin and yang, I guess, good and bad. And it just kind of stuck. And then I was doing some business coaching about 4 or 5 years ago, trying to put some stuff online, wanting to grow outside of the area that I'm at in Kentucky, reach more people that were reaching out to me. And the guy was like, "Well, do you go by nickname? Like, what do they call you?" And I was like, "No, I've never really had like Angry Trevor was my old nickname. We'll get to that, I'm sure." But, and I was like, "They call me the Angry Viking Therapist sometimes." And he's like, "Done deal, trademark that one." So I did. And it, I don't announce myself as that a lot, but it definitely comes out in different areas. So they just kind of stuck and I ran with it. Seems to fit my appearance and my attitude. So yeah.
Are you Norwegian?
I do have some percentage in there, thank goodness. It's not a lot, but I did the whole DNA thing, and before I knew a lot about DNA testing and what to hang on to, but we did it, I don't know, quite a few years ago, and I do have some Norwegian in there, thank goodness. So I'm
Yeah.
safe. Yeah, yeah. It's not the
Yeah,
I
I
don't
got
use
a
the
bunch of
majority. I'm
Norwegian in
clearly
my
pretty
blood.
white, but
Well, good. So tell us a little bit more about your story, how you transitioned kind of that law enforcement to this point.
yeah, and the best way to sum it up is I had absolutely no interest in being a therapist whatsoever. So I got into law enforcement. I really got into public safety really early. When I was 16, my family, we moved a lot because of my father's job. And I was never necessarily lonely. I always had friends wherever we moved to, but I never had kind of that thing that I was into. And when I was about 16, I found a medical explorers program. And a lot of the people were, wanted to be surgeons or, medical doctors. I was really interested in EMS and they had a connection with that. I knew nothing about it. It was cool on TV. It was the 90s, way pre-internet, so what I'd see of it looked really cool. Rescue 911 kind of shows, and they offered ride-alongs. So I went and did a ride-along, 16, and I was hooked. And probably even embarrassingly rode along far too often. It was something I enjoyed doing on the weekend. I wasn't 18. I couldn't get certified in anything yet, but looking back alone, those couple of years doing those ride-alongs and really seeing trauma for the first time, those men and women were absolute mentors to me. I had great parents, but those were the adult mentors in my world, and I wanted to be like them. So my plan when I was that young was to become a paramedic. So when I was 17, still in high school, they had an EMT class, and you usually could not take it back then at 17. But I knew the teacher of the class was the director of the local EMS. So he knew me, knew my work ethic. So he allowed me to come and take the class. I actually finished the whole class the fall of my senior year. Unfortunately, I was still 17, so I couldn't do anything with it. Took my national registry, passed it. And then when I turned 18, became an EMT. I worked in my hometown EMS for a couple of years, still with kind of this plan of being a paramedic. That was still kind of my future goal. And I made the mistake of doing a ride along with law enforcement. A good friend of mine was a cop in the town. I thought, yeah, I'd like to kind of see what that job is like. And it took one ride along and I was hooked, changed forever. So I actually went away to college, went to Texas Tech University, which is where I'm from, in Texas, had gone back home to go to college. I found out in that first year that I liked Texas girls and Lone Star beer far more than I liked going to class, and they don't mesh. So I failed out the first year. I was on academic suspension, came back home. Still wasn't old enough to be a cop yet, that it was still kind of on my radar. So I became a dispatcher for a couple of years, in a small area, but a bunch of agencies together in this dispatch center. And when I turned 21, I started applying everywhere, got on a local police department, where I would eventually meet my now wife, then girlfriend. We moved to her hometown for a year, and I was a deputy there. And then I would eventually end up in Kentucky. That was all pretty short time, public safety. I would end up in Kentucky, working for the Lexington Police Department for about 4 years. I call it a medium city. It's not a major city, but it's
Mhm.
definitely not small.
Same as
One of the two bigger
Madison.
cities. Yeah, it was a busy agency. I learned a lot very quickly. And then eventually I would go to an agency that would merge with the state police, a traffic related agency that would eventually merge with the Kentucky State Police. That's where I spent most of my time. And needless to say, and we can get in further later if you want, but needless to say, it did not end well for me. I'd done about 15 years as uniform law enforcement, about 20 totals public safety with the EMS time. And I was not doing well. Um, one of the incidents that I know kind of started me down this track was just a fatal accident, which sounds like nothing nonchalant, but I worked for the state. We went to fatal accidents every day. It was something that we did, working the interstates and the highways. This one, however, this lady had struck a dump truck and careened through a guardrail and down a 45-degree embankment about 100, 140, 150 yards. At the bottom of this embankment, she hit a tree. And when she hit the tree, two things happened. One, she got stuck in the vehicle, and two, the vehicle caught on fire. So pretty bad combination there. The fire department wasn't anywhere near us yet. They were still coming. It was a very rural area. So myself and a couple truck drivers ran down that muddy hill, tried to get her out, and we couldn't. So, to your worst imagination, what we saw, what we heard was pretty bad. But I tell that story not for the sensationalism of that story, but I remember that kind of being a turning point for me, but I didn't know it yet. I did like everybody else did. I went home, I kissed my wife, I took off my uniform, and I went to work the next day, just like it was just another day. But what I started to
Mhm.
notice over the next couple of years was I went from really a great employee, star employee, multiple awards for bravery in the line of duty from a couple different agencies. I'd get awards for most felony arrests in a post area. I really liked being a cop. I was really good at it. I tried to do it honorably and professionally. I just enjoyed it. I liked putting bad guys in jail. Some bad guys more than others, depending on what they did, and a guy that Sarge could call upon and get the job done. I really liked being that guy. I went from that guy to the absolute worst employee you could possibly have. I was written up all the time. I was complained on all the time. My activity went to nothing. I was constantly written up for low activity, coming from a very high activity guy. And I was angry all the time. I was pushing my family away. And I just remember just sitting in my cruiser, just being mad all the time. They called me Angry Trevor. I was just mad all the time, mad at the world, mad at people, mad at God, mad at supervisors, probably mad at myself more than anything. And I just became this terrible person. And it eventually culminated with me being told to take sick leave because I clearly had some stuff going on. After 6 months of sick leave, burning my sick time that I had saved up, no doctor, psychologist, or psychiatrist would sign for me to go back to work. None of them would put their name on it because I was such a mess. What we probably now know is things like PTSD or anxiety or depression and, dealing with stress. But, I'd lost everything at that point. I'd used up all my sick time. I couldn't go back. They got rid of me. I watched my cruiser drive out of my own driveway, my longtime dream and goal that I wanted for my life. And I was an absolute mess. I had no job, no career, no skills other than being the police. My family was pushing me away. I was pushing them away. No income, no skills, no college, nothing. And I'd gone to three different therapists. And the first one told me that that's not what he deals with. So he kind of gave me some other names. The second lady cried when I talked to her, about these things that I was dealing with and some of the experiences and things I had seen. And the third guy told me that my anger and PTSD were so bad he didn't know what to do with me and he didn't know where to send me. So that's three strikes right off the gate. And I know now I probably should have just kept looking. Maybe I'd find some help, but three was enough for me. I was out of there. And I felt like I was so screwed up that even the pros didn't know what to do with me. So I went back and finished my bachelor's in criminal justice just to have something, on the record. And one night I'm sitting on my back porch drinking a bourbon and I'm on my school's website. I never want to go to school again. And I see they had a master's in professional counseling. And honestly, just sat there and thought like, man, maybe this is how I can figure out what the heck is wrong with me and fix it. Do that for a couple of years, get licensed as a therapist. I'm never going to go to school again. One night I'm sitting on my back porch drinking a bourbon. There's a theme here. And my school's website, and I see that they have a doctorate in this stuff. And, next thing I know, I have a doctorate, currently working on my second doctorate in trauma informed care. I have a office in Lexington, Kentucky, where I do kind of traditional therapy there. I have an online program where I reach out to people, which is kind of one of the ways that we met. And that's it. That's kind of the story of how I got from I just wanted to be a cop or a medic to doing this now. And it's been a crazy ride.
Well, first, I mean, incredible story. But the first thing I want to know is what bourbon were you drinking?
Man, nobody's ever asked me that before. I don't really know. I live in Kentucky, the home of
I know.
bourbon and horses. So there's no telling. It was probably something good. Knowing me, it's probably something decent.
That's why I wanted to ask you because I know you're in Kentucky and figured you
Yeah,
had some good taste. Because I'm a bourbon snob as well. My collection through COVID got to obscene levels, and
I understand it. Yeah,
I run a book and bourbon club. I don't drink much anymore, uh, but when I do, it's a really fine bourbon. What's your
yeah,
go-to?
man. For like I won't say I'm not a daily drinker, but if I called it kind of my daily go-to, fan of Woodford Double, which is they're a little more pricier than just the regular Woodford, but that double oaked is really good. I like very oaky wood kind of tastes. I had an injury back when I was 21, and I don't have a very strong sense of smell because of that injury, very traumatic injury. And so I have to have something really strong. That's why I like cigars and bourbon. I can really taste that. And the funny thing is that um, Well, I'll tell you the other one that is not in my house is Eagle Rare 10, which is a big favorite of a lot of people. It's very good. I like it. But I've made 2 kids on Eagle Rare 10, so it's not allowed in my house anymore. So we tracked it down to that day. So apparently that makes me really good at making daughters. So we don't do that one anymore, just out of tradition,
uh,
really. It's a good one, though. But the funny
Eagle
thing
Rare
is, being in
17 is my
Kentucky,
favorite.
oh, yeah, oh gosh, absolutely a great one. And the hard part is being in Kentucky, where most of it is made. Some of it's made in some other states, where most of it's made. It's so hard to find here. When I
Yeah.
get to travel a lot, do a lot of speaking engagements to different counseling groups and different public safety groups, and uh, I look at there because it's easier to find other places than right here where it's made.
Yep. All right, let's get into some of the hard stuff then. So you said that, you made a really good point there, right? There's 3 therapists that couldn't help you, but you
Hmm.
probably should have kept looking. I
Yeah,
think it's really important for people to understand this point because someone may, first of all, it's hard, especially for us men to even consider going to therapy.
sure.
Like we want to swallow that, we want to rub dirt on it. And unfortunately, especially with mental trauma, you can't rub dirt on a brain.
Hmm.
So we got to go and seek that help, or swallow that pride, or tuck our tail between our legs, whatever. So I understand that that's a hard part. And I think it gets even harder when you go to 3 and it's like 3 strikes, you're out, they can't help you.
Hmm.
But it's that point of continuing to find that right one, because that right one can really change your life's trajectory or save your life. So talk
Definitely.
about finding that right one where you made the mistake of not going further with that. Talk to someone right now that A is potentially knowing that they're getting to that decision point, like, hey, I probably need some help. And then how do they find that right one?
Yeah, it's an awesome question because it's one that's not found. The answer's not found very publicly. And to be perfectly honest, I got a license in professional counseling, finishing my master's, got licensed a couple years later. You have to work under somebody for a couple years, and I still didn't know what all those letters meant behind people's names. So the big thing I'll say is when you look at the professional side, there's kind of 3 kinds of trained therapists. One is a psychiatrist, that's your MD, that's your medical doctor. Any of these groups can do therapy that I'm going to talk about, but they tend to lean to a kind of a specialty. So psychiatry is the MD. They tend to lean towards the medicine and medical side of it. They absolutely can do therapy, but not very common because there's so few of them. They get paid by a short amount of time, seeing patients like your medical doctor does. The other is psychologists. Psychologists can absolutely do therapy too. I know some great psychologists, licensed psychologists do therapy. They can also do a lot of formal testing that the folks on my side don't do. So if you're doing like pre-employment things, fit for duty exams, wanting to get like a very factually based 50-page exam done on you or turn out, they'll do a lot of formal testing. And then I'm a licensed professional counselor, so I'm the third kind. And the reason I'm glad I went this direction. At the time, I just picked what would get me into the profession and what would help me. I'm glad I went this way because our specialty is counseling. It's in our license, mental health counseling, licensed professional counseling. That's our specialty. So I got really strong, focused education based on helping the person sitting in front of me. So that's kind of the generalities of what you should be looking for as far as a professional goes. Beyond that, there's a couple things I always like to say. One is you definitely want somebody who's informed in trauma, right? Their specialty or one of their subspecialties is trauma. Now, there's a very popular buzz phrase going around it now, trauma informed care. I'm a trauma informed therapist, trauma informed care. That's good. My argument is that we should all be trauma informed because, as I'm sure we'll talk about, it influences everything in your life. Whether you've had trauma or it's been something that's smaller and chronic over time, it absolutely affects all the different states of our mental health. So, yes, you want to find somebody who's trauma informed. I don't know that I'd look for that buzz phrase, trauma informed care, because it just seems to be everywhere. There's no license for it, there's no certification for it. What I would do and what I always encourage people to do is first, if you find somebody that you like what they've had to say, or they have the credentials that you think you're looking for, or maybe they're in your area and they take your insurance, I would search them out on social media a little bit first. It's one of the reasons that I kind of built up my social media, whether it was going to expand greatly or not. When I'm looking for a restaurant, I'll give you an example. My wife and I were down in Tampa where a brother-in-law lives, and it was our anniversary, wedding anniversary. So we wanted to go somewhere local, somewhere mom and pop, not a big name place. And what do? We got on Google and Yelp like everybody does. And keeping in mind that everything's going to have a couple of one-star reviews because some people are just cranky or maybe the staff had a bad day that day. I like to look through their stuff, their menu, their food. What does it look like? What's the restaurant look like? What are the reviews? Does it say you have to wait an hour? I'm out, right? So do the same thing with your therapist. Now, there's not a lot of Google and Yelp when it comes to therapy, but see if they have a social media presence. See if they have a web presence. In addition to a lot of the things that I do, I'm also a professor at a university at the collegiate level, at the graduate level for counseling, and I teach a private practice class and a business class. And I tell them you have to have a website. It is non-negotiable. Pay for it if you have to. You need some kind of footprint that somebody can get on there, and even if it's just a bio and a picture or some blogs that somebody can get on there and say, that's the person right there I want to talk to. In fact, I encourage them, and this will kind of answer the question a second way. I encourage my students when we talk about marketing, which I'm definitely not a specialist in. I'm a therapist, but when we talk about marketing, I tell people the best marketing you will ever have is getting in front of people and talking, right? Doing podcasts, go out and do speeches, even if they're local. Go talk to a social work branch, go talk to the government, go talk to parents. Whatever your specialty is, get in front of people because, as you know, doing business, that's how what I want for my speeches is, yes, to help, to offer some help, to plant some seeds, maybe give some solutions to somebody that's hurting, but also I want people to go, I think that guy knows what he's talking about and I like what he has to say. And my favorite compliment that I ever get when I do those speaking engagements is somebody will come up and say, man, I swear it's like you were talking about me. I'm like,
Mm,
I was talking about me, dude. I was telling you my story, and the story of the people that sit in my office, because a lot of us suffer from the same stuff, whether it has a diagnosis or name or not. Right? I love it. I get very fulfilled when people are like, "I swear you were talking to me." Like, I know, I was talking to me. I was talking to all of us. Right? So, I I want to dig into to kind of answer that question. I want to dig into who they are, right? And
mhm.
they may not represent that they have two kids and you're a parent, that's what you're looking for. They may not have a lot of letters behind their name. What do they have to say? What do they have to say? And same token, maybe they don't have a lot, but they take your insurance. You like what they have to say in what little they've presented. Go talk to them. Go spend the money. Spend your $20 copay, spend the whatever it takes that they are going to charge you for an hour. It's worth it. Just go and talk to somebody. Just hear about them. Tell them what your issue is and see what they have to say about what can help. And you may walk out of there and think, nope, not the person for me. That's okay. You don't have to review them on Google. It's okay. Find the one that talks to you. I one of the things I say in my therapy sessions is this first one is about me learning about you, where you're from, what you're doing, what's going on in life you need help with. It's also your chance to learn about me. We're not going to talk a lot about me, but if I have a story that might connect with you, which is one of my favorite things to do, but it's also your chance to learn about me. Because why would you take advice from somebody you don't know? Why would you take advice from
Mhm.
somebody you don't have the same values as them? You don't have the same, and maybe I get in there and talk about crazy stuff that absolutely turns you away. That's okay. I'll help you find somebody else. But that's how I would find somebody, both kind of that very specific kind of licensing way. Make sure you're going to a professional. Um, Make sure they know what they're talking about. And again, there may not be a certification or letters for that, but if you go in there and you've spent an hour with them and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Maybe that's your person. That's how I'd choose.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So you got some great advice on how to choose someone, but you also dropped some great business nuggets in there as well. And this is across the board. So this does not just have to do with psychologists, psychiatrists, and counselors. When you
Hmm.
said building a social brand, because that's what you tell them to do on your in your collegiate course, that's for everyone. So
Yeah.
Rory and AJ Vaden, who own Brand Builders, did a study, and they did it across all generations. So from baby boomers down, and the further you go down, so down to Gen Z, the the percentage of people that do business with you is it's over 50% that they look for a social media presence, a social
Mhm.
brand, like your personal brand is the stronger you have in a personal brand, the more likely they are to do business with you.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's even more so than a corporate brand. So you may be
Yeah.
building a business, you may have a great counseling practice, or you may have a great coaching practice, or whatever your business is, but your business brand isn't as important to those younger generations as your personal brand.
Yeah. One of the best advices I ever got early, and I don't have a massive following. Mine, I kind of have a niche, a specific niche that tend to follow me. But I was working I have my office going. It's going well. I've got some employees. I really get to service a lot of people in the area, which is good. We've become known as a very trauma specialists in the area. Kind of whether it's adults with childhood trauma, which is one of my specialties, or whether it's public safety or A people because we're kind of type A dudes, whatever that means now. And that kind of changes. But um, one of the best advices I ever got, it's actually where I met our friend TJ. We were on a business coaching group together. This is at least 4 years ago, I think. And we were both just kind of, figuring out the social media world a little bit. And he got on and asked a question of these two mentors. And uh, nobody else asked a question after that. So I was like, well, I'm going to use my money and time wisely. And I said, kind of told him a short version of my story. And I said, I'm trying to figure out when to start doing like YouTube. And CJ Ortiz, the metal motivator, was the guy's name. And he said, right now, just turn the camera on and talk to it. Just tell them about you. Just talk about stuff. And here's the deal. Your first couple videos are going to be horrible. Like you're going to look back on them one day and think, why did I even hit record? Like that was horrible.
Mhm.
But you have to get that message out there. I'm far more interested, as you said, I'm far more interested in being able to kind of flip through your social media or your brand or your website or however it's done in the business world. I'm far more interested in seeing that and going, yeah, like I like what that guy has to say. My number one, I don't know if recruiting tool is the right word, but my number one way that clients find me is hearing me in like a speech or online. Like I like that guy's got to say. I'm gonna reach out to him and see if let's chat, see if he's the right guy for me. Not because I'm a massively prolific speaker or have great presentations. I try to, but because they heard me talk, and they said, yeah, I like what that guy has to say. Let's try that one. As opposed to how many people honestly come to my office and they're like, yeah, you took my insurance. So I just picked you first. And that's all I know about you.
Yeah. I want to pivot here and go to back to your story. You mentioned that one instance where the woman went down the cliff, and
Mhm.
obviously that was pivotal for you. But I got to imagine there were a lot of little traumas in all your years of law enforcement that
Sure.
led up to that, and that was kind of the tipping point that you mentioned. How do people identify those? I don't necessarily even want to call them micro traumas, but
Mhm.
traumas in their life so that it doesn't get to the point like it got to for you where you turn into that angry Trevor.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. And there is a way. The big thing is when we talk about, whether we say that micro or, um, I've always learned, and one of the ways that I've always appreciated the way this is said, not all traumas are big T traumas, right? Big T traumas, the ones we think about, car crashes, 9/11, suicide, murders, like there's little T trauma. And that's not little in of its effect. It's just adverse life events, right? Uh, neglected as a kid, uh, parents never loved me, parents divorced, we moved around a lot, we grew up poor, I was bullied through years of school with no specific incident coming to mind, right? It's adverse life events, everybody has
Mhm.
them, but enough adverse life events will end up a big T trauma or affecting you the same. So here's what I always say about that is we don't actually have to know the moment. I don't think that car wreck was the moment I changed, right? It's a story that I remember that fits what happened to me later, which is the point I'm getting to. There were lots of things I can look back and say, yeah, that messed me up a little bit. What I want to know from people, and to answer your question, what should they be looking for is how did it change you now? What is your reaction now that's different than before, right? And especially, what is your overreaction, right? What are you going too far on? Anger, anxiety, depression, guilt. Um, when I started kind of teaching and doing therapy, I always thought I'd have to teach guys why anger was bad because I've been in a profession where anger helped, right? If you're fighting somebody by yourself in a ditch 40 minutes away from backup, anger's helpful, right? I don't hate the person. I don't know this person, but being mad and getting the job done, I can't say it's all terrible all the time. So I thought that I had to teach guys why anger was bad. I found out why I didn't have to because everybody that sat across from me or sits across from me online, virtually, say, the anger that's bad is the one where you screamed at your kids and your wife, and then 15 minutes later, you're sitting on the couch feeling like a piece of crap again. I did it again.
Mm.
I freaking lost it again. That's the one that's detrimental. Where's that coming from? Did your wife and kids drive you nuts? Yeah, absolutely. I've got those, right? Like, yes, they do things that annoy me. Did it need to go to a 10 out of 10? No, at the time it felt right, and now I feel embarrassed that I went 10 out of 10, right? What is it affecting you? We can trace back to, is there a moment or is there just a series of life events that have just constantly kicked you in the nuts that have put you in this overreactive stage? So here's when I look back, here's how it was manifesting for me. When I look back, again, I was in those years at the state. I was in primarily a traffic side. We did a lot of commercial vehicle stuff. We did a lot of traffic relief stuff on the interstate. That was kind of our focus. And I went from like really enjoying doing that, like really, I loved more than anything, and any cop listening will appreciate this. I loved turning a small violation like speeding into a massive felony arrest, right? Finding a ton of dope being transported or a kid being trafficked or somebody that was wanted for murder out of another state. I loved that part of it, that quick interview, that quick roadside interview. I went from loving it to it becoming so volatile to be doing that, it was bad. So, before I really started changing, if you were reckless driving or DUI or doing something, put somebody else in danger, we took care of it, wrote you a ticket, took you to jail, whatever. Doesn't mean you're a horrible person. Uh, that what I noticed the last few years was every little thing might as well have been a violent felony, right? So I'm stopping you for speeding. And because my brain is, and we can talk about why, but because my brain is going back into that mode of dealing with this wreck, not the wreck itself, but that same kind of mode, because my brain is going back to this life or death, overarching and overreaction feeling, that speeding complaint became such a felony, a violent felony in my brain, which doesn't make sense, I know, but I was overreacting to everything. And what a physically and mentally exhausting way to live life. And of course, that translated to my family. Of course, that translated to dealing with people on the side of the road and dealing with bosses. Right. I was never in trouble, never in trouble. And I became a lot of trouble towards the end because I was just so violently opposed to everything. And so what are you looking at? What changes are you seeing? What changes is your family identifying, right? Of course we change as we get older. I'm different in my 40s than I was in my 20s. I have a different mindset. I see the world differently. I see the bigger picture now. That's normal change. What are you overreacting to? What are you tired of sitting on the couch thinking, God, I'm a piece of crap, man, because I did it again. I did the one thing I promised I wouldn't do again. I just did it again. That I think is how you identify what's going on, and then let the professionals identify maybe where this is coming from, because it may be something big. It may be a series of crappy events that have just got your brain stuck.
Yeah, that's so good. It got me thinking though, there could be someone sitting there going, do I need to identify the traumas before I fix them, or can I just fix myself?
I would say no would be my overarching answer. Sometimes it's very helpful. I really like those light bulb moments when I'll give you an example. So when you come in, you're dealing with anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, whatever it is, whatever's brought somebody in. I kind of want to know a current example. All right, well, my wife said something yesterday and I knew I flew off the handle and I threw the chair across the room and I screamed. Okay, anger. All right, we've got a strong reaction there, right? And there's more questions to this to kind of get you to this place. But here's what I'm looking for. What is it when you think of that last night that happened? What does it mean about you that's negative? What I am statement is about you that's negative, right? And of course, you want to be defensive at first. Like, well, I just overreact a little bit, but she really shouldn't say those things to me. She knows it bothers me. No, 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 no. What does it mean about you? What vulnerable thing does it mean about you that's negative? I'm a piece of crap. I'm just a piece of crap. I'm no good. Okay. I'll have some more questions than just that one. But what I'm going to is generally like, okay, when you're holding that, I'm a piece of crap. When is the earliest in your life that you remember feeling like that? I'm a piece of crap.
Mm.
And inevitably they say 7, 10, 15, 20, 25, something could have been yesterday, but something previous, right? That set us up for that feeling. And you're just adding crap to the crap pile, right? Now, here's an interesting thing. Um, for a vast majority of my clients, this isn't everybody because I do work with a lot of public safety that are dealing with very critical incidents. But for the majority, and even some of them, when I ask them, like, when do you remember feeling I'm a piece of crap, I'm no good, I'm terrible, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm stupid, whatever it is for somebody, I can almost write the number 7 on my hand. And it's not a magic trick, but most of the people in my office or online will say 7 or 8 years old, second or third grade, right? I could show them like 7. It's a magic trick. I don't know your life, right? But why 7? Well, 7 is when your prefrontal cortex kind of starts coming online, right? And if you've ever raised kids, you'll think back 7 years old, second, third grade is when they start really asking questions. They really start kind of forming their own self, right? They have a little more attitude. Before 7, you're just kind of this bowl of jello learning not to poop yourself and learning letters and colors, right? 7's when got that thinking brain coming in, that prefrontal cortex, some of the areas that we look at when we look at trauma. You get that 7 is starting to come online. What did you learn at 7? Right? Did you have parents that, yeah, maybe you were poor, maybe somebody passed away early, but your parents or whoever it was around you made you feel like, you know what, we're okay, we're going to get through this. You're a good kid. You can do anything you put your mind to. I'm proud of you, no matter what that is, right? I love you. Or did you never learn that? And the reason that I had to pick up, literally go and do more training about adults with childhood trauma is because the vast majority of people were saying, oh, it was 7 when this happened, this horrible thing happened, or this complete neglect, or how many times I've heard in my office after 6 or 7 visits, and I say, like, dang, man, look at you changing. I'm proud of you. It blows me away. It no longer surprises me, but it blows me away how many people say, that's the first time everybody's ever said they're proud of me before. Like, and we're surprised. We're surprised why we have these overreactions when it was planted into us about 7 or 10. And it could be 2 or 3 if there's a specific incident people remember, but most people don't remember before 7 because of that prefrontal cortex. And we're surprised now that, that this is the thing that keeps cropping up when you get in an argument with your spouse 30 years later. You feel the exact same way at 7 when this terrible thing happened to you, or 12 or 15 or whatever it was for you. So to kind of shore up the question of like, do you have to know? Nope. Most of us will figure it out, right? Most of us can go like, oh, that light bulb moment of like, yeah, that makes so much sense now, right? Because I see why I do this. It's not an excuse. It's not a reason. This doesn't make it okay. We need to work on it, right? But I'm no longer blown away when people are like, oh, this reminds me exactly of this. That fight I had with my wife last night, I feel the exact same as this age when this was going on. So it's helpful to kind of figure that out. But if we narrow it down to just kind of a, man, at 12, life was miserable. All right, I can roll with that. We can figure that out because
Yeah.
it's what the brain is doing, not the event itself. The event's over.
Yep. What's super fascinating about that is, have you read the book Positive Intelligence by Dr. Shirzad Shamin?
I don't think so. I might put that on the list.
So he talks about PQ, positive intelligence, but so there's a lot in there that you would like. It talks about the upper brain, lower brain,
Hmm, hmm.
some neuroscience in there. But there's an exercise he has where he talks about the empathy exercise is imagining the 8-year-old. So it's
Hmm,
getting
hmm.
you into your sage powers. So as you're talking about age 7, 8, it's like he would have you put a picture of your 8-year-old self in front of you on your desk or something of that nature. So tapping back into that sage and having empathy for that version of yourself, because all of us can have empathy for, our 8-year-old version. And if you can't find it, he says, if you can't find empathy for yourself, put a picture of your 7, 8-year-old child there.
Yeah.
So it's just fascinating as you're talking about that and the prefrontal cortex coming into shape there. He uses that same age frame to go back to to have
Yeah,
empathy
well,
for
and
yourself
here's
and
why it's
others.
so powerful. That like I like that every theory kind of comes at that same thing, different approaches, rather, right? Whether you're talking to your 8-year-old, whether I use EMDR, which we can talk about, but here's the big thing that they all connect with, whether we call it upper and lower brain or the different parts. Here's what I love to tell my clients the first time I'm with them, and it's not that they can just turn this off, but I think making sense of it is massively important, right? Figuring out you're not crazy. So when we look at the brain or we look at trauma and stress, we like kind of two parts of the brain. Now, if there's any neuroscientists, like hardcore PhD neuroscientists, they may call me out on some of this terminology, but just in general, for my cop, brain, there's two parts: prefrontal cortex, which I've talked about, your thinking brain. It makes decisions. Even in emergencies, it can make an informed, rational decision. And then you have this limbic system, that lower brain, which has a couple different parts: amygdala, hippocampus, kind of the way down automatic parts. That's your kind of either fight or flight or emotional overreaction, area, really strong. And
Hmm.
obviously we need that. You need it if you're driving, right? If somebody in front of you crams their brakes and all you have is the thinking brain, it's thinking like, oh, look, the brakes lights are on, the distance is closing. We should evaluate some options here. We're in trouble, right? I need that fast acting one to go, oh, hit the brakes, right? We don't even think about it. Well, that's good. We need it for public safety. We need it for trauma. The good thing about this area of the brain is the bad thing, though. The good thing is it's very fast and very strong, which is what you need to take over. The bad part is it's very fast and it's very strong, and it will take over. And when you deal with more trauma and stress, not only does this limbic system change in size, which is amazing to see on a brain scan, one part gets bigger, one part gets smaller, it changes in strength. And there's a couple ways we know this. One is brain scans. We took a bunch of 18-year-olds that just joined the military. We scanned their brain, then went to combat, came back, we scanned their brain again. And you've seen the different brain scans where the colors light up. Well, that tells
Yep.
neurologists and doctors about what's working, to what strength, where the blood flow is, and so on and so forth. And what we found was this limbic system, fight or flight, is the only thing working. Didn't matter what we asked them. Their rifle serial number, where they were, what's their favorite thing to eat. Everything's an emergency. Uh, that's pretty handy for cover and concealment in battle. Not so handy for, hey, where do you want to go to eat? Did you remember to pay the water bill? Who's picking up the kids tonight? Right? Emergency's not so good. So we know that's overreacting. We know that's what's going on. There's a physical reason we know this too. When your amygdala, which is kind of like the smoke alarm of the brain, when it detects an emergency, it gives your body some things that you need in order to deal with this. It speeds up your heart to get more blood, you breathe faster to get more oxygen. Your body heats up so your tendons and ligaments won't tear. It's like you stretch going to an emergency. You get a dump of adrenaline so you're stronger. Your digestive system shuts off because it turns out not so handy to use the bathroom in the middle of a fight. And it hones your senses, or tunnel vision, that we'll talk about, or that most people talk about. Well, that's what we need. That is a true emergency response. You need these things. Well, what does a panic attack, an anxiety attack, or what was my case, an anger attack look like? Heart racing, breathing fast, sweating for no reason, stomach's jacked up, senses are messed up, shaking from adrenaline, right? Um, so your brain is doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's just doing it at the wrong time, right? How many times have we gone over the top in anger or anxious response or even depression, and that's the feelings that we're having, right? When you wake up from a nightmare, from a trauma, or when you're faced with saying you don't even know where it came from. Your just heart's racing and you're breathing fast and you're all geeked up, you're all amped up, right? Your brain's doing what it's supposed to be doing, it's just doing it at the wrong dang time. And here's the last thing about that amygdala. It's kind of like the smoke alarm in the brain. So if you go home tonight and you burn dinner, smoke gets in the room, the smoke alarm goes off, but it's not a big deal. You open the windows and the doors, you laugh, and then you go out to eat. It's not a big deal. But if that smoke alarm goes off at 4 a.m., it's a whole different ball game, right? Where's the kids? Where's my
Hmm.
shoes? Where's the dog? How do we get out of here? Why is it beeping? The point, though, is it's the same smoke alarm, because the smoke alarm's job is not to detect if this is burning drywall or burning chicken. It just says there's smoke over here. And I don't want it to detect it because A, it could be wrong, and B, it's going to be too slow. I just want the smoke alarm to say, there's smoke over here. You better do something about it. Right. Now, by that same token, let's say you go home and you burn dinner, some smoke's getting in the room. You think your smoke alarm's about to go off. You pull your chair over underneath your smoke alarm. You stand on your chair and you say, hey, man, I appreciate all you do for our family. Little smoke alarm, but we're good. It's just smoke. It's just from the chicken. Guess what? Alarm goes off. Why? Because it sees smoke. What's the analogy of this? You can't talk yourself out of the alarm not going off. You actually have to get rid of the smoke, right? You have to get rid of the problem. You have to get rid of the reaction. What is it reacting to? I want my alarm to keep going off when it sees smoke, whether that be smoke in my house or smoke in my brain, right? I need it to go off. I just don't need it to go off all the time. And it sees
Yeah.
smoke, so it's going off, and then we overreact to it.
Well, that leads into big T trauma. So I'll tee this up a little bit. That's such a good analogy. So I've seen some things in my life that I hope no one else has to see. I know you have. You've already
Mhm.
spoken about one.
Sure.
You work with a lot of first responders. You worked with a lot of military and former military. These images that, well, I'll be honest and say that I haven't worked through them in therapy.
Mhm.
They don't leave the brain. They
Nope.
surface at random times,
Mhm.
completely uncontrollable to us. How do you work through that first, the first response? Like we in Madison here, we just had a school shooting.
Mhm. Mhm.
Children dead, a teacher deceased. These first responders in Madison were tremendous. Those kids, those teachers, those first responders see things that no human should see.
Sure.
How do you even begin with helping those people?
Yeah. So it's going to sound very similar because the brain is still doing the same things, even for that more recent critical event, even if it's a past critical event, right? So obviously, we're never going to get rid of the images. That's not real. We're not actually dealing with the trauma. The trauma's terrible, right? Things that you've seen, things that I've seen, things those kids have seen. It's terrible. We're not going to make it good, and we're not going to make it go away. If I could cause amnesia, I'd be rich, right? Just make the bad stuff go away, right? That's not real. But go back to what I'm saying about the brain and this overreaction, right? Obviously, when this stuff comes up or a reminder about this stuff comes up, you're going to have a reaction to it. I'll share one with you just because it's been so long. So, here in Lexington, when I was still working for the PD, we had what's known as Comair 5191. It was a plane crash, went down, killed 49 of the 50 people on board. The co-pilot's the only one that lived, and he had very debilitating injuries, both mentally and physically. And we responded to that. So horrible, horrible thing you just don't know you're going to see, right? So the reason that this is fresh on my mind is that it was an anniversary just recently. It happened in 2006, August of 2006. So they just kind of had an anniversary, back in, and there's a memorial outside of the airport, which I fly out of all the time when I go to speaking engagements. And so when I see that, of course I think of those images. Of course I think of that response and my friends that went to it, and to what people had to deal with in the community. It was in my community, so most of those people were from here. So I have a very good friend who lost a sister that's a firefighter here in that crash. So there's always going to be reminders. I'm not going to get away from the reminders. I don't want to dwell on them, right? What's dangerous is not the reminders. The smoke itself is not dangerous. It's my reaction to it, right? And I talked earlier about kind of getting rid of the smoke. You can't get rid of all the smoke. I just need to know it's not dangerous, right? So go back to kind of these single incident traumas, right? Which can be absolutely debilitating. Nothing is going to make it go away. But here's what I regularly hear when we treat these traumas, whether it's single incident recently like that, a shooting or a crash or, horrible things, whether it's multiple of them, or whether it's just a time period. The treatment is very similar. So what I use is known as EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Don't get too caught up in all the letters and the meaning of it. Francine Shapiro, who created it, in fact, gave an interview once and says she wished she would have named it something way easier like reprocessing. But here we are. It's EMDR, right? So it'll carry on, and it's life changing. And there's a lot of different facets to it, but EMDR, the eye movement part of it, has to do with the bilateral stimulation. And there's a lot of things that we as therapists know work with EMDR, but we'll probably never be able to necessarily prove through a brain scan. Or there's some things we absolutely know because we've proven them over and over again. And one of those is bilateral stimulation slows down the limbic system. right? So slows down the alarm. What does that mean? How does that help with trauma? Well, if you're providing bilateral stimulation and the limbic system through a series of things, not just doing it, we need to set it up first, is slowing that limbic system down, then when I do bring up parts of that memory, it's not in my face in color, right? Just giving me this horrible reaction. To me, when I did EMDR over some of those events, it's kind of like it was over here, and I could kind of like peek over at it, like, oh, I hate seeing that, right? While I'm processing this, and you need to do this with a well-qualified therapist that knows what they're doing. But kind of get a peek at it. And what ends up happening? I hear this over and over and over and over again, 30 times a week in my office, multiple times online every week. Um, it feels like it's not as strong. Now, some people will say feels like it's black and white and it's sitting over there. Some people say it's black and white in the back of my head. Some people say like I can see it. It just I don't know. It just doesn't punch me in the face the same way. One of my very good friends, and he has no problem with me telling this story. I never would. One of my friends that responded at 5191, we did EMDR with that plane crash, and he said it feels like there's a Snapchat filter over it. Like there's just it's kind of cartoonish almost. It didn't change the event in any way. You'll never change the event. The event's bad, right? What I'm getting at is it's not the event that's causing the problem. The event's terrible. It is your reaction to the event. It is your brain's overreaction to the event that's causing the problem, right? There's kind of two hemispheres there is two hemispheres of the brain that kind of have different jobs. The left side of the brain is kind of the logic side of the brain. It's it's where everything's stored. And again, if you have a double PhD in neurology, some of these terms may not make sense. Don't call me out on it. But in general, the left side of the brain is kind of the logic side of the brain. It's where everything's stored. You didn't drive to the studio today thinking about what to do if you get a flat tire. But now that I've said flat tire, you can kind of pull up like, yeah, I know what I do. I have some memories of changing a flat tire. It's the storage. The right side of the brain is kind of the chaos side of the brain. It doesn't mean bad chaos. It's just all the incoming information, the decisions being made, right? The limbic system really rests over there when it comes to the emergency side of the limbic system. The prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, it's in the front, but it really rests on that left side when it's really in that kind of logic state. So, and recalling state. So, what's happening in REM sleep, rapid eye movement at night, one of the things we know, you're not looking at anything, your eyes are moving, your eyelids are closed, is both those hemispheres of the brains are kind of connecting, and the information from today is kind of being put away in the storage files, right? So that's why you dream about stuff or why it recalls some things. Well, what storage shelf do you put really bad trauma on? There's, it doesn't feel like there's a shelf for that. There is if you do it correctly, but this processing, so it kind of gets stuck on the right side as like this raw nerve, right? And if you ever had a kid fall and scrape their knee on the concrete, you don't have to touch it to make it hurt. You blow air in its general direction and it's painful. There's your raw nerve, right? Your brain knows that what you're dealing with today is not the event. The event's over. Prefrontal cortex knows this. The emotions and the reaction and the danger and the feeling and the sad and the anger and the anxiety and the depression and the guilt feel as if it's going on right now, right? Kind of go back to that idea of where did these I am statements come from? Here's one of the things that really changed my understanding about trauma. And if anybody has looked up EMDR or been interested in it and looked it up, don't make the mistake I made. I'd been doing therapy for a couple of years, doing really well with trauma clients, and heard of EMDR. It's been around for a long time, but it's kind of gaining popularity in the 2000s and 10s and 2020s. And in my opinion, it probably gained popularity because pre 2000, early 2000s, we had people going to war, had a battle, lost a buddy. Then we spent 24 years in this stuff. We have dozens of deployments and hundreds of friends lost. We had to up our game when it came to trauma, right? So it's been a long time. Well, so I looked up EMDR on YouTube, and it was this weird lady waving her hand in front of people and asking them if they felt better. And I thought, that's the stupidest stuff I've ever seen in my life. I'll never do that. Right. And I was not only again, I was antagonistic. People would call and say, it says you're a trauma specialist. Do you do EMDR? Nope, no way. Come get some real therapy. Right. Well, then I went to a seminar. I'm man enough to admit. I go to a seminar and I saw EMDR being used on an acquaintance of mine who I know had seen a horribly tragic thing about 20 years before. And in 30 minutes, that EMDR therapist had done what was taking me 3 months to do with people, getting this thing to a certain state, right? It doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it go away. I'm just tired of the overreaction all the time, right? Go back to kind of my example of like every little traffic violation might as well have been a violent felony for me, because every traffic violation represented in my brain, I'm about to have to pull you out of a burning car wreck. It doesn't make sense when you think of it in broad spectrum of this event that I'm at 10 years later. It makes perfect sense when you look at it as to why is the brain overreacting. I don't want to do that again. That was it's the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. I don't want to do that again. So my brain will do whatever it takes not to have to deal with that again, whether it makes sense or not. Whether it's dissociation and you just completely shut down, whether you numb out, whether you fight back, whether it becomes scary. All this makes sense when you look at the fact that the brain's primary function is to keep your butt alive. It doesn't care if you like your house or your car. Yes, sure, it likes dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and adrenaline, right? But job one is to keep you alive and make more of us. That's how our species lives. So the overreaction will always be the brain thinking it needs to do something to keep you safe, right? If the event was 20 years ago and something comes up now, it's your brain saying, I can't do this again, right? Here's kind of the last piece that I think a lot of EMDR helps with, or therapy helps with, that took me a long time to understand, especially with public safety, but I've seen this a lot with trauma victims too. A lot of people will come in and say, like, I mean, I have some anger moments, I have some sad moments that are a little over the edge, but really, I'm just numb. Like, I just don't care. I'm just done. I don't care about anything. And I know I should. I have a great wife and kids, or husband and dog. And, like, I should be happy sometimes. I got zero. Well, if you look at good and bad on a continuum, and I'll kind of explain this because I know some people are just listening. If you look at good and bad on a continuum, a line, good's on bad side, what bad's on the other. Right in the middle is numb. And numb isn't healthy, but it's pretty safe. You can't really get hurt numb, is what the brain thinks. And on one side of numb is the bad, and it's kind of a continuum, right? The time I broke my leg, and that goes up to the time I wrecked my car, and that goes down to some really bad stuff. And on the other side of numb is the good, and it's also kind of a continuum. The time I fell in love, and the time I got married and had kids, and right on up the chain to like the really amazing stuff at the end. Well, we don't want the really bad stuff at the other side. We can't operate in that all the time. So we want to get rid of it. The problem is the brain doesn't know plus and minus, right? The brain knows serotonin, norepinephrine, adrenaline, uh, dopamine, right? That's why different cultures, things are good and things are bad. The brain doesn't know the difference. So to get rid of the bad, we have to be willing to get rid of the really good. And I'm okay with that. Maybe I don't cry at movies or cry at Christmas, or, that's okay. The problem is if you keep doing that, and those listening, like if you just keep marching that into the middle by getting rid of the good and the bad, eventually you just get to numb in the middle, because numb's safe. It's not very healthy. So what do we have to do? Just like dealing with these critical incidences, just like dealing with a series of events, how do I get some good back? How do I just get, a half an inch of the good back on this continuum? I have to be willing to get a half an inch of the bad, right? And that doesn't mean we dwell on bad things. EMDR therapy is not about sitting in this narrative of saying bad things. I need very little information about the trauma, right? I'm more interested in what your brain's doing. But if I'm willing to get a little of the bad back and be okay, yeah, this sucks, but I'm all right, I'm okay, then you get a little of the good back. And then you don't have to dissociate. You don't have to turn off. You don't have to, you don't have to run away from a relationship. So think of it in I'm a firm believer, and this is where things like borderline personality disorder come from. So if you're a kid and something really bad happens to you, whether that's from somebody you trust, something really bad happens to you, you obviously push them away as violently, whether it's physically or emotionally, you push them away as fast as you can. And then you realize you're 7, you can't make macaroni and cheese for yourself. So you got to bring that terrible person back in and love on them, right? I always thought a great title for borderline personality disorder was, get away from me, you a-hole, come back, I love you. Right? Because that's what it looks like. That's where it comes from. And there's some chemical stuff in there. There's some upbringing stuff in there, but like, doesn't that make sense about post-traumatic stress disorder? Right? I have
Yeah.
to get so far away from this as fast as I can. It ruins everything. And I don't care if there's no good anymore.
Yeah. That's so good. It made me think of, um, our law enforcement, military. We're seeing an insane number of suicides at
Yeah.
this point, and
Yeah.
it's really saddening, disheartening, all the words. And you just said the brain's primary function is to keep us alive, which
Hmm.
I know it to be true. But there's a tipping point, or there seems to be one, where the brain starts operating against you, where you get into this dark space where people are saying to themselves, or the brain's telling them, that the only way to escape this burning room is suicide.
Yeah.
What is happening with the brain for us to get to that point where its primary role is survival, to seemingly to now it's time to end our lives.
Yeah. There's two things that I always think about with this. And the first has to do with trauma in general. And then the kind of the suicide part that it took me a long time to understand. Today's dysfunctional emotions. So today's anger, anxiety, depression, and guilt. They're created by previous life events, which could be age 2, could be yesterday, just previous life events that left us feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And that is what's being re-triggered today. It's not the event. The event's over. It's this overwhelming feeling of helpless, hopeless, and not good enough that gets re-triggered by something. And when I started doing therapy, I thought, I'm gonna have to change those words. I can't tell really tough guys like me that they feel sometimes helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. Right? You call me helpless in a bar, I might take a swing at you. Right? But every time that I say those words, previous life events that left us feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough, and that's what being retriggered today, everybody across from me lowers their head and goes, yeah, that's exactly how I feel when I'm at my worst. Maybe not all day, every day, right? But yeah, when I'm at my lowest, I feel helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And that is what's being retriggered, which is why I asked that question, that I am blank statement. Where'd that come from? I bet you didn't start it yesterday on your first screw up of your life, right? So there's that, right? It feels helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. Trauma does. Here's the other piece. And this isn't specific only to public safety military, but I think it's very prevalent. Um, in public safety military, or just kind of type A, aggressive jobs, you're taught to take out the problem. I'm here to take out the problem. I take bad guys to jail. At its core, that's what policing is. Policing is not um, making everybody happy, right? If you can unlock somebody's car, that's cool. That's great. That's great service, right? Policing's primary job is to enforce laws and investigate crimes. At its core, that's what it is. So you are taught to find the problem and take out the problem. If you're the problem, how many times in suicide do we convince ourselves we're the problem? This world would be better without me. Yes, maybe it is on that side of not wanting to feel pain anymore. That's that helpless, hopeless, not good enough. How many times is it, well, I'm the freaking problem. I'm out of here. Everything's going to be better once I'm gone. Right. And I think that's so impactful to those of us that, have walked that path in whatever level that means for somebody, thought about it, got close to it, attempted it. Man, that's exactly how I would have described myself at my worst. I'm the
Mm,
problem, and I'm helpless, hopeless, and not good enough. And I think that well frames, in my professional opinion, suicide.
mm. Yeah, I got a buddy up here. He's been on the show before. It's Chris Farley's brother Tom, and he gave the analogy, and I kind of briefly brought it up in that tee up to that question. He said our brain, and he works a lot in trauma now as well, to honor his brother, and that's what he's fallen in love with, specifically with alcoholism and PTSD. And he said it's like being in a burning building, and the only exit you can find is suicide,
Mm,
is what your
yeah,
brain's telling yourself.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me.
And that's the unfortunate part. And then, from my story is being on the other side of that, having dear loved ones that have taken their own life. I can fully tell anyone that's listening that who's hopefully, in a spot where they're not considering this, but if you are, I can tell you that your pain only transfers to those that love you.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and one of the things that that's a great statement. One of the things that we know about, especially public safety suicide, is I have it in the speeches that I give. I'll forget the exact numbers, but uh, it's about 2020. I think I pulled the numbers, and there was lots of police deaths. I took out the COVIDs and the accidents. There were 89 um, deaths that were either work-related accidents or felonious assaults. 89 of those deaths fit in that category. Those are the two things that we work very hard to prevent when it comes to public safety and lots of other things, but public safety specifically. At the same time, there were a couple of hundred reported police suicides. So 89 felonious and accidental deaths, 200 roughly reported suicides. Here's the problem with that, though. A, the suicides are outweighing the stuff we're trying to prevent, right? And I think we're doing better about having these conversations, but we're not there yet, right? They're still happening. Here's the other tricky part about public safety suicide, especially, is that um, I could go on the FBI's or Department of Justice website right now and find anything I want to know about crime in my area: race, MO, time of day, what did they use as a weapon, what was taken. You can find all sorts of statistics. There's no government organization that's collecting data like that on suicides, especially police suicide specifically, public safety. There are some groups out there that are trying to collect the information. They're nonprofits, but they still have to be reported, right? So here's the scenario I think of. You're the chief of a two-man department, right? Just you and your deputy, and you've been working there for 25 years, working hard in this small town. You know each other, you know each other's family, you spend your holidays together. You've been some crazy stuff together, you've seen some terrible things together. And his wife calls and says, I need you over at the house right now. And you go over there, and for whatever reason, tragically, he's taken his own life. Well, if I report this as a suicide, I'm not saying that people should do this, but just give it some thought about, does it happen? If I report this as a suicide, his wife and family get nothing. Nothing. Most life insurance policies won't even pay for suicide, much less his medical pension from the department.
Correction. Most life insurance policies will. So this was
Good.
my
Okay,
previous
good.
world. So it depends on the state that you're in, but it's 1 year or 2 year exemption on it.
Okay. All right. So there is some progress there. Good.
Yeah.
But that's not a work-related injury or death when it comes to public safety, right? So that's out. Or when you call this in, you can say, look, um, you know, I just called him at 30 minutes before, asked him to come out. So he was loading his weapon and it went off accidentally and killed him in the line of duty because now he's on duty, right?
Mm,
Now, I'm not saying this
mm,
is what people should do, right? Uh, but if you don't think it happens, you're a fool, right?
mm.
So how many of that couple of hundred are really double, triple, five times more? And we just never know about it, right? And again, that's true in society too, but that's a very specific way to kind of look at, like, how much trouble are we in? How often is it happening? We're doing pretty good about learning how to not get shot, not get hurt, not get in a car accident. Good. We need those things. I learned those things. Uh, are I received, now granted, my academies were a long time ago, but I didn't receive any training about mental health. The only training I remember receiving about mental health is, hey, make sure you keep some friends around that aren't cops, right? We've come a long way from that, hopefully, but it still goes in one ear and out the other with
Yeah.
most agencies.
Actually, I want to amend my statement on the life insurance. What I said is true. What I didn't say is that, because you were talking about police and we could take it to fire, EMS.
Absolutely.
Well, what we know about that, actually, or what I know about that is when you said on the duty, this triggered that thought. If a firefighter is killed on duty, their life insurance benefit, their group life insurance benefit is 10 times the salary.
Okay.
If they die off duty, I think it's 1 or 2 times. So to
Gotcha.
your point, if they report it as a suicide, it wasn't on duty, then it's 1 or 2 times their salary. If they
Yeah.
die on duty, it's 10x
Yeah.
their salary.
That's
So
life changing.
which is a massive difference,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To the beneficiaries. So to your point, that actually could very well be true.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, I don't recommend people do it. That's not legal advice. But how many times does it happen? And now that we know how much more prevalent it is and why some of the reasons it's happening, that's sad. That's hard. It does give us some treatment, venue for those of us that understand it, though. It does give me a direction. It's so much better. Although tragic to hear, it's so much easier for me to treat understanding helpless, hopeless, and not good enough than it is in, well, what do you think about this? Right? Which is kind of generic early therapy training. What can we do different? You know, which there's lots of great stuff about what we should do different. We should take care of ourselves. We should move forward. So sometimes therapy is about getting your life together. Sometimes
Yeah.
therapy is about, let me help you make some progress steps forward. Right? Behavioral kind of therapy. The cognitive leans a little more on the, let's get your thinking straight first. Right?
Yeah.
But that exploded my mind and my possibilities about how to treat this when I finally understood what trauma was, as opposed to this horrible thing that you're dealing with. Get over it.
Yeah. So speaking to the men real briefly, what is it about us that we won't face this? We won't seek help. We won't, like us. You're a type A, big tough dude. I put myself in that category as well.
Hmm.
These military, these police, they're all the type A, bravest people we know. They're putting themselves in danger. What is it like? They'll go and face immediate threats or danger, bullets flying at them,
Hmm.
toughest scenarios imaginable, but we won't ask for help or we won't seek someone like you to fix our internal shit. Because we all got shit,
Yeah.
all of us, whether they're small T's or big T's. We've all got trauma. We've all dealt with stuff going through life because none of us get out of life unscathed.
Right.
How do we break this for men? What is it about us? And how do we get our bravest men to seek help so that they can be the best that God made them to be?
Yeah. And it is definitely breaking a pattern. Right. And a couple thoughts. One is that go back to our brain's primary function is to keep us alive, right? How many times, and this isn't always bad in the right situations, how many times have we just sucked it up and dealt with it, right? Like, okay, this bad thing's going to happen, but for my kids, I'm going to push us through it. Money, job, emotion, tragedy, like we're going to be okay. I'm going to get us through this like we always do. Like, that's not terrible. It's not terrible to move forward, to advance yourself forward. And a little bit of that probably comes with, like, I just got to suck it up and do this. It's going to be terrible. I'm going to suck it up and deal with it right now. That's okay. Right. Therapy is probably not going to help you toughen up to deal with tough stuff. Right. Well, maybe it can, but like in the moment, nobody's coming to my office thinking like, how do I deal with this horrible, right? So there is some reality to, I just got to suck this up for right now and deal with it. Yeah. I mean, I would say that about, I got to go back to public safety just because it's my wheelhouse, but lots of different jobs, lots of different careers, lots of different lifestyles come with, like, how did you deal with seeing that child, brutally murdered or killed, or like, you just got to go deal with it. Right. If I stay in there and I'm all emotional about it, this job's not going to last very long. Right. You're going to be a wreck. So, and it comes down to like the idea of, I'll get back to that, but you know, most people, most civilians, everyday people will see between 1.5 and 2 critical events in their life. Most public safety will see between 400 and 800 in a career, depending on which study you read. Well, that tells me a couple of things. One, it is possible to keep going. They've proven it, right? And two, it's not the event itself that's the problem. Because if the event itself was the problem, we'd quit on day 2. And also, myself and a coworker can go to a same event and have two different emotional reactions to it. I don't think one's going to be happy about a tragic thing, but like one's devastated, one's ready for lunch, right? That happens all the time. Some of that's numbing. What I'm getting at is one, what does it really come down to? The helpless, hopeless, not good enough that we talked about, but two, um, that sometimes I just have to be numb and go do the stuff. And that's not great in the long run, but sometimes it's necessary, right? Most psychologists will tell you that compartmentalization is a terrible way to do business. And I'll tell you, it's an evil necessity. You can't be trouble with one of go to the next one. You go, whether that's in your personal life or whether you're public safety or military. Like you just have to go sometimes. You just have to suck it up and go deal with it, right? We dads kind of like the idea of I'm going to take care of business, right? It's why we like manly things, right? So one is the fact that we're just kind of trained or respond to or genetically wired to just go deal with it. The other part is, and this will make me very unpopular in the counseling community, which I sometimes am, not in a martyr kind of way, just, um, some therapists are really hard to talk to, So, some therapists, I went to them, right? And they're not bad people. I went to them and I looked at them and thought, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not helpful at all. Um, I always tell a story one time. I don't go to a lot of counseling conferences just because I'm kind of an oddball, and I know that's by design. So that I'm not looking for sympathy for that. But I was like, you know what? I just need to go make some counseling friends. All my buddies are still public safety. I just need to go make some counseling acquaintances. And so I go to this, I'll say state level counseling conference, and I go to a couple of the things, a couple of the breakout sessions, and then I go to lunch. And I don't know anybody in this room. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to grab my food and go sit down and meet somebody in the counseling world. And there's a joke among counseling community that like therapists always try to wear like the right color shawl to match the mood of the person sitting across from them. And I don't know. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess. It's not my thing, but I sit down, there's these ladies and they introduce themselves, and I'm not joking. They're talking about which shawl they like to wear to match their clients emotionally. And again, I'm not saying that's wrong. Maybe that's really comforting for somebody, right? Maybe you respond really well to that. Most of the people that I talk to don't. So I don't think, and please don't take any of this, no matter whether it's education related or experience related or what I think about trauma. I don't think I'm the best in the world. I hope that I do a really good job, right? I'm a constant learner. Like, who needs a second doctorate? I want one because it's constantly learning. I'm working on it, right? I'll continue to get better. But I'm not cocky about that. I don't think I'm the best in the world by any means. Some of my mentors run circles around me, in my opinion. I've learned from some really amazing therapists, but uh, as a whole, therapy, whatever that air quotes is, counseling, it represents this really soft, comforting, which is okay, make you feel better kind of world. And I don't think it's about making you feel better. I think it's about making you operate better. I'd like you to feel better as my client, but I don't think it's about making you feel better. So I think that makes it really hard to be willing to seek out sitting in front of somebody, being vulnerable with them. And either A, they say, gosh, that's a lot, or two, what they say just doesn't work, isn't clicking with you. And everybody's got different styles. Mine's not the best. So everybody's got their styles. But I'm a very um, results oriented person, right? I want you as a human to feel better. I want you as a client to operate better. And so this is what intrigues me about the whole neurological side of this. This is what has poured me into further education. This is what's poured me into wanting to figure out what the heck is going on here, because I want you to not be stuck where I was and where you are now. And I don't have a perfect life. I still react to things sometimes, but man, being being in that state of helpless, hopeless, not good enough, and the reactions from it, whether you admit that's the problem or not, because it sounds kind of weak, it's mentally and physically exhausting.
Mhm.
So I think those are two big reasons that we don't seek out therapy. It feels weak because we're supposed to be strong. And then sometimes when we seek it out, it looks really weird, man. It looks really weird.
What percentage of therapists are female versus male?
Oh, vast majority are female. I wouldn't know the number, but vast majority are female. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any helping professions that way.
Yep. Yeah. That's why I asked, because it is that caring, nurturing type of a role where females have historically been predispositioned, anyhow, teachers,
Yeah.
nurses,
Yep. Yep.
therapists, stuff of that nature. Um, and I wonder, that's probably part of it as well as, those type A male maybe not be able to resonate with some of them. Not all, but some.
Sure.
And
Absolutely. Yep.
yeah,
And by the
that's a
same
big,
token, I will get clients that 3 sessions in, I'm glad to help them, but I'm thinking like, "What'd you pick me for? Like, you are so the opposite of me, lady," and not just female, but like, you know, and most of them will say, like, "Hey, a friend came to you and said you were really direct and, you know, that's what I need." Or some of them will get on my bio, and I'm sure some people get on my bio and they're like, "Nope." My picture is me kind of standing cross-armed. It's a black and white picture. My kids call it my MMA picture because it looks like I'm about to go fight somebody. And my bio is public safety and and so I think some people probably get on there and read no nonsense and that stuff, and they're like, not for me. Yeah, I don't know how many because they don't call me, but um, you know, it's both sides of those groups that are want some know that they'll respond to somebody that's more like them, and then and this this would be a terrible just sound clip, but because I don't mean it as just a sound clip, but or taken out of context, but like some therapists suck, man. It's any job, right? Like
well,
some
look, yeah,
therapists don't
that's
know what
any
they're
job,
doing.
right?
Yeah,
So that I actually wanted to make, I'm glad you said that because I want to make that point. I came from the financial advising world. I ran a very large firm. I saw competition all the time
hmm,
when I was in the advising practice. Like, not every financial advisor is good. There's
yeah,
levels to the game as well. There's some that are amazing, some that are just starting out, some that have been 30 years and are world class, right?
yeah,
We've all had teachers, some sucked, some were great, right? Like every profession has that. So it's finding that right one, the A that's really good, but B that's right for you.
yeah, yeah,
But there's still a stigma. Like, most people know they need a financial advisor. Most people will go see the doctor.
hmm,
There's still a stigma of most people not going to see you or
yeah.
someone like you.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite things to hear, I talked about the speaking side, but on the therapy side, like the one-on-one side, one of my favorite things to hear, and this isn't a me thinking I'm the greatest. It saddens me that I hear this. How many people are like, dude, I've learned more in this hour than I've learned in 5 months with my last therapist. And again, that doesn't mean I'm the best. Maybe I just clicked with them better.
Mhm.
But it doesn't make me think I'm amazing. What it makes me think is, what the hell are people telling people? Like what? Like it would destroy me, which is why I seek further education all the time. I'm always learning. Uh, it would destroy me to have to go. I don't know. Like, and maybe there is some times in some certain clients where I need to go like, man, maybe I'm not a good fit for you. But it would destroy me to sit there knowing that you just vulnerably came for help and I have to go, yeah, I don't know. That's crazy. I don't know. I don't know. We'll talk about it next time, I guess. Like that would destroy me. That would destroy me as a person. Um, so sometimes I wonder what they're great therapists. Again, I've got a couple of mentors. Unfortunately, one of them passed away a couple of years ago, who I think Dr. Hurley was probably the greatest trauma therapist there was. I was very, very fortunate to learn from him. He was a colonel in the army. I mean, what a great, what a great person to learn from. He was a Vietnam enlisted, came back as an officer, and made it to colonel before he opened his own private practice. Man, I'd sit with that guy for an hour and learn a year's worth of information. So there are great ones out there, but there's some really crappy ones,
Yep.
that don't bother to keep learning.
Yep. And that's all professions, like we already mentioned.
Sure,
So just
sure.
find the right one. All right. Last question I always ask everyone to end the show. So it could be on something we've spoken of or completely unrelated. But what's an unpopular belief you hold to be true that you think most others disagree with?
Man, that is a great question. Mine tend to kind of lead into the stuff that we've already talked about, actually, of how to take care of some of these situations, right? That I am not there. I want you to be comfortable in my office. I want to tell some jokes with you. I want to trade some life stories, with my clients. And one of my favorite things dealing with clients is like, because of my travels, getting, very fortunate to go speak at all these different groups. I'm the clinical director for a nonprofit out of Vegas that works for wounded officers. We've talked about Caleb House that works with trafficked kids that I work with. Um, there's a lot of travel and that meeting a lot of people, and I kind of enjoy when somebody's like, "Yeah, I'm from Seattle," and I'm like, "Oh man, I got this buddy up in Seattle. You'll never believe it." Just trading stories, right? But um, the reality is, I want you to be comfortable, but therapy is not to pat you on the back and comfort you. I'm not here to make you comfortable. I'm here to make you more efficient. I'm here to make you not dissociate. I'm here to make you not overreact. That's what I want for you. In fact, it melds in one of the things that I'm sometimes called out for is I'm a very didactic therapist. In my brain, I want to give you all the information so that you can go forth and make your life better. Right. That makes me sometimes kind of more of a teacher style than a back and forth style a little bit. I have to be careful with that. One of the greatest compliments I ever got in my life, the greatest compliment and cut down in the same sentence. I did an associate fellowship up at in New York City at the Albert Ellis Institute. That's who created one of my therapy theories, rational behavior therapy. And the first time I'm training up there years and years ago, I ended up with the president of the Albert Ellis Institute as my instructor. You rotate through them. And so I'm a little nervous, honestly. And we do this mock session at the end. She says, "Wow, that is one of the best explained tenets of rational motive behavior therapy and what he needs to do than I think I've heard before." So I'm thinking, like, okay, I know what I'm doing here. This is awesome. And she said, "Man, sometimes you need to shut the hell up." Right, and like get some information and give. Let me wind that all back into to one thought here is um I have to be careful with that, and that's the unpopular side, is that um we're supposed to sit and cry together, or supposed to make you feel more comfortable. um I read after the last election cycle, I read a therapist group that said, like, our job now is to grieve with our clients. No, it's not. No, I'll grieve for you as a human, right? But we're not sitting there to grieve with you. I want to get that stuck mentality out of your stinking head that you keep responding with helpless, hopeless, not good enough, and the anger, anxiety, and depression and guilt that it causes. And that doesn't mean it has to be aggressive. Doesn't mean it has to be didactic. That's the part I have to work on sometimes. But I'm not there to make you feel better. It's just kind of like what I talked about earlier with law enforcement, right? If law enforcement comes out of the grocery store and you lost your keys in your car and they can help, that's an awesome community service. That's cool. But their job is to investigate crimes and enforce laws, right? My job is to clean this stuff up with you, right? So that, not to make you feel better. Maybe that's an ultimate goal. I want you to actually think more clearly so that you can see the picture, that it's not all traumatizing, and you can go, wow, I used to really it. Very few things feel better than getting through a situation where, a year ago you would have lost your crap. And now you're like, well, that was crazy. Man,
Mm,
I feel so much better. Right. And it comes from those
you know,
things.
that's awesome. It's funny about you bringing up that study about the election. I literally said this to my wife the day after. I said, therapists are going to make a killing the next 4 years with all these people with Trump derangement syndrome.
It is true. Same as COVID. Yep. Yeah, it is true.
But dude, this has been such a good conversation.
Good,
Where can
good.
people find you, follow you?
Yeah, the easiest way is to kind of find me in the social media world. If you just search Dr. Trevor Wilkins or the Angry Viking Therapist, you'll come across me. My website is the Angry Viking Therapist. Instagram is kind of the most prolific. That's Dr. Trevor Wilkins. YouTube is Dr. Trevor Wilkins. I try to post longer form stuff on there, but that's where you can find me and get a hold of me. It's not too hard to find.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Spartans, you know what to do. Follow this man, share this show, and remember the good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.
This is Sparta!